Hey guys, welcome back to the video series that I'm doing about lessons and stuff for us to cover. This is the second one. This week I want to go over kind of some really basic stuff. I want to go over some fundamentals that we need to learn as a team when we making the switch between solo queue and 5v5. So we will get into that right now, starting with 5v5 basics. We're going to be going over 5 different topics. Number 1 is 5-point defense, invade paths, lane assignments, front to back versus back to front, and when to split, and when to be in fights. So first we're going to cover 5-point defense. What is it and what do we need to do it? Well, frankly, it's the safest way to start the game. The objective is to cover every single sneaky thing the enemy could do without weird things like dashing or flashing over a wall as an entire team. As a coordinated 5v5 group, we need to shut down the standard 5v5 group invade paths. We're going to use it when we're playing something more mid to late gamey, or when we very simply will lose a fight because we have a worse level 1. So these are the five spots for blue side. Top stands right at the entrance to river. Jungle stands in the bush just above mid. Mid stands far enough forward to see the white line in case they pass through mid. ADC stands on the ramp looking down in the river with the ability to run if needed. And the support stands outside of tri-bush. Now, standing outside the tri-bush is important, Noah. If you stand in the bush, you leave a horrible blindside in which skilled players, including us, exploit. Always take one step out of the bush, Noah. I swear to God. Alright, now, this is the red side, and it's important to note it's pretty much identical. You just flip it. So nothing really changes other than where everyone goes, but the positions stay the same. So, the same thing applies. Ethan, it's important. Stand outside of the tri-bush. If you don't, you leave a blind spot, and then you can lose the game. Ethan! Okay. Now that we've been over that, let's get into our next point. Switching from 5-point defense to invading. When do we do that? Well, usually when we want to use our early games, we want to invade. When we need kind of an advantage to get an early snowball going with some earlier picks, or if we dropped a catcher, something like Blitz, Morgana, stuff like that we can capitalize on, that's when we want to invade. So let's talk about our 2 primary invade paths. We have 2 of them, one for each side. We might develop more in the future, especially if we tend to favor early game comps. I have a few other ones that we could use, really creative, but they get complicated. So here are our main 2. Number 1 is the bot lane overt invade operation. Bot lane overt invade, otherwise known as Operation Boy. I will only be referring to it as Operation Boy from this point forward. Now, the first step is to enter straight through the bot lane. Now, usually we go through jungle, but this saves about 6 seconds by going through lane. Hence the name overt, meaning open. We don't go through the jungle, we go through the lane. Then we stop and get in order with our main engage leading, then with any follow-up engage burst or going behind. Then we hug the wall up towards the tri-bush, and right before we are about to round the top and enter the bush, the third person in order, or the second person, sorry, drops the ward over into the tri-bush. This allows the leader to focus solely on the engage without having to ward. If there is someone to catch, great. We kill him, burn flash or whatever, and leave. If no one is in the bush, we path towards Krugs, dip into the bush, and continue pathing. Hug the wall left of Krugs, and path straight up into red. The leader drops a quick ward in the red buff bush to show anyone that might be running, and once again we look for a catch. If there's no one there, or we can't catch anyone, then we path up towards Drake into that bush for our last chance for a catch. If nothing's to be found, we simply leave. No harm, no foul. Now, if we are blue side, this is our standard route. The mid lane overt invade with strategy and tactics, otherwise known as Operation Moist. It will be exclusively referred to as Operation Moist from this point forward. No, you cannot call anything else. Now, this path is a bit more simple. You make a beeline straight through mid lane and take a sharp right at the first mid lane wall on the right side. Hug it as you walk to the bush, and then another sharp turn and follow the bush up. Make sure the engage is leading, then continue going. Right before you hit the bush, the second person in the order drops a wall over the ward as close to the blue buff as possible to help get vision on fleeing enemies. If one is spotted, if we are spotted without a pick, then we simply leave. There's nothing we can do. Otherwise, if there's no one there, then we press forward. We touch the bush just behind wolves, just in case we happen to see an enemy escaping, which in that case we would just leave. And if not, then we continue pathing towards blue buff. Just before crossing over, the leader will ward the right side of the blue side bush just before continuing on. And then we look for a catch. If no enemies are found, then they're probably long gone. We were spotted by a ward. Just exit. No big deal. Stay as a group. Stay vigilant in case they're counter-engaging or counter-ganking. But other than that, that is it for that. Now let's talk about lane assignments, which is essentially where does each laner go during the mid game. Now the mid game is defined as the moment any turret in the game falls. As soon as the first turret falls, it's the mid game. So to avoid any confusion, where does everyone go typically? Well, no matter what, the ADC goes mid. Why? Because it's the safest lane. The most wards get put around the area, and there is a quick turret to run to, and lots of exits to run out of. The ADC needs the safest farming, so that's where Ben will go every single time. The other laners depends on the objectives we are playing around, as shown here. Essentially, the laner with TP should be covering the lane away from the objective, and vice versa. If there is no TP, then you better not be splitting away from the live or almost live objective. Obviously, the same is reversed if Drake is up. Now, it is important to note that jungle and support can be doing a million different things at this point. In theory, they should stay around the objective, but depending on the jungler, depends on what they should be doing. For example, a Zed jungle should 100% be splitting or sitting by a splitter to catch anyone rotating, or while a tank should be more focused on farming or peeling for the AD carry mid. The support can either be looking for kills in a side wave, something like a Pike, protecting the carry, something like a Braum, or establishing safe deep wards if we happen to catch a lot of members on the opposite side of the map. It really depends. And to be clear, if there are no objectives up, and it really doesn't matter, as long as you have enough time to rotate healthily to an objective, you're fine in a side wave. It's important to know that all of these stay the same on either side, so since Baron and Drake don't flip sides, so if Baron's up and you have TP, you always go bot lane, red or blue side. Another thing I want to talk about is fighting front to back versus back to front. You may have heard the term before, so let's just lock in exactly what it means. So fighting front to back is what we call traditional fighting. It's what you imagine when I say a 5v5 team fight. Tanks engage, supports peel, carries dodge damage and blow up people. It's clean and usually ends up focusing on killing tanks. In order to do it right, we need traditional engage, something like a Mumu or Alistar. Some tanks shred DPS that can largely ignore tank stats and kill them quickly, and then some peel to keep that DPS alive, whether that be another tank or a shield support. The weak points are it's really predictable and easy to foil. If a team just avoids the 5v5, there's not a whole lot you can do to force a lead. On the advantage, it typically leads to the least amount of failure, in the sense of if it fails in any sense, usually one or two carries are able to stay alive and continue farming. We might lose the objective, but overall our losses are cut pretty cleanly. However, fighting back to front is much more like street fighting. Dirty tricks, flanking, ignoring the front line. You break the back, then you go to the front. Hence the name. It requires really heavy disruption. Think a diver like Wukong, Vi, or Camille that can separate them and get right on the back line. It also needs self-peeling carries that can handle themselves without a bunch of tanks. Something like Tristana, Caitlyn, Vladimir. You also need really good follow-up, mobility to capitalize on this disruption. Going back to front can allow you to fight pretty much whenever you want without having to set up a front line or needing a 5v5. You can do it 2v2, 3v3. So it's pretty unpredictable. It also presents way more pressure to the enemy that they physically can't ignore. If they ignore it, it's actually easier for us. However, it requires a lot more communication between us to make sure everyone is ready, along with a lot of wards to make sure that we're safe in our pathing. It also doesn't always work if the enemy team is expecting it and they have a lot of zoning tools, something like a Veigar Cage or a Maokai ult. It can really backfire and end up way worse than traditional front-to-back fighting. Usually it results in an ace if it fails. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is when you should be in the side lane. Going from solo queue to 5v5, We can no longer just ignore a team to push out waves and have it justified. Oftentimes, we need to stick together. So here's when you should do it, and here's when you should be in your traditional lane assignments, as we talked about earlier. You should be assigned lane if you are not in lone support, there's more than 1 minute 30 on an objective timer, otherwise you should start backing and rotating to the objective. If there is between 15 seconds and 1 minute and 30 on the objective, and you have TP, or you are nearby the lane and you don't need a base for things. Why 15 seconds, you might ask? Why not TP once the fight starts? Well, TPing to when the fight starts is a horrible idea because the fight is already starting. That's 3 or 4 seconds that you are not there. And unless you have really good cleanup crew, which you won't always have, it's almost always better for you to just be there. And if you are cleanup crew, just wait patiently. It's always better for you to actually be there. The last thing is if you are the primary splitter in a heavy split comp, then you need to stay in the lane. Do not leave. Never be in fights if you are the primary splitter. If we're running a split comp, the win con is splitting. You can never be in fights. Those fights are when you should be splitting. That's when you get inhibitors. So that's everything that I wanted to talk about. Now I have set up a quiz. This one is going to be a bit longer than the other one. It was like I want to say like 10 to 15 questions, somewhere in there. It won't take too terribly long, but it will take a bit of time. So go to this link, fill it out, and we will be trying to discuss this live and implement it live into our practice pretty soon. But yeah, that is it. I hope you guys have a good following week, and I will see you at practice.